Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful conversation from some of the best experts in our industry on how to advance our career. Join the collective of Black marketers across the world, advancing their brand as we work towards creating a collaborative community. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Marketing for the Culture podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Gomez, and I'm so excited about today's special guest. He has been a supporter of the African American Marketing Association for about a year. Very, very supportive, sharing all of our podcast episodes every week. And now he's finally here. Mr. Marc Pitman, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Woohoo! I am super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. You are the founder of Concord Leadership Group. So we're going to talk about all things leadership. I already feel like this might be a one-on-one therapy session.
Well, for all my coaching people that are listening, I'm not a therapist and I've never played one on TV, but I'd be glad to have it be a one-on-one coaching session if you like. just us and our friends listening in.
I mean, look, leadership is tough, and we're going to talk about the challenges in leadership. But before we do, how did you get started? What is your career and entrepreneur journey?
Well, I was born at a young age, and my parents' names were Mom and Dad. No. My wife often jokes that I give a $10 answer when people want a 10-cent answer. So I'll try for $1.50. I had a weird family growing up that my parents got into Amway in the 80s and started learning stuff. And, whatever you think about that kind of thing, they started learning things about goal setting and positive mental attitude and personal leadership that they were wondering, why haven't I learned this ever before in my life? Why wasn't I taught this? So they took my sister and I all the seminars, all the rallies. They required us to read the books, the book of the month and the tapes. We had to listen to tapes. You could tell in our house, we had an old house and the doors didn't always work well, but you could tell if someone was in the bathroom because there's a tape going on. Zig Ziglar or Florence Littauer or Les Brown was coming out of there. Like, all right, that's occupied right now. And so it was at 16 that I realized I could choose to trade time for money, but I'd rather build revenue streams that keep on going. I remember being 16 years old and thinking I want multiple streams of revenue, and it seemed like books were the way to do it for me, because I thought rap was going to be the way. Honestly, I know I know. White kid from rural Maine. Of course, rap will be the way. It just kind of spoke to me, and I thought this was great. And then I found out you still had to be musical, and so written words seemed to be a better alternative for me. It's sort of like I have a face built for radio, I have a voice built for print. So I've always looked at what are the different ways, and if you know Clifton StrengthsFinder too, I found out one of my strengths is maximizer. That means that I don't just see a project, I see large implications that the project can have. So I've often gone into that in different areas of my life. And to me, entrepreneurialism just was one of the things that seemed to make the most sense to me. So even when I had full-time jobs, I also did side hustles and other things to, I don't know, just keep myself engaged.
Yeah. I mean, what was I doing when I was 16? I
am a little weird. My family, I thought that not all families apparently assign homework. I had homework because I was at school, and I had homework because I was a Pitman. I didn't know that.
Marketing for the Culture podcast is brought to you by the Concord Leadership Group and their new 10-week leadership coaching certification. Coaching helps leaders excel, and learning coaching skills helps leaders unlock the potential of their team. You will learn more about this ICF-accredited coach certification in today's episode. Okay, so I guess you have Concord Leadership Group. So was there anything particular that allowed you to form the company, and, what do you do and how do you help people?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So part of the other weird thing about my family is they found out about coaching in the 90s. So when my wife and I were dating or were engaged, we had premarital counseling with our parish priest, but we also had 6 months each of Zig Ziglar success coaching. And it was really interesting to be able to be independently thinking about what's our life look like? What do the decades look like? Not just what does the wedding day look like? A little bit later, I was working at a boarding school as a chief fundraising officer and, as the major gift officer there. And one of the alumni parents was a life coach, and she offered that to the faculty for free. She was so grateful for them. And so having that coaching experience again helped me to be a better me, which allowed me to be better in my job. That's what I started realizing. The consultants I worked with had preset formulas and tried to push them on me, which is fine. That's what I was hiring them to do. But they didn't seem as invested in me learning and growing myself as in renewing the contract. And the life coaches seemed really geared to, it's all about not needing the coach long-term. So I just knew that's what I wanted to do. In 2003, I had the opportunity to get trained with FranklinCovey as an executive coach and started about, marketing is obviously something that fascinates me. I niched as the fundraising coach because I was an executive coach who knew nonprofit fundraising. I figured that's something that people have an implied ROI in it when people wanted to invest in me. What I didn't realize, and my wife was smart enough to see, I missed, was that would also niche me as a nonprofit guy instead of a leadership guy. And that was frustrating to me because I'm about leadership. Happen to love nonprofits and nonprofit people, but I'm about people, not about nonprofits. So when we moved to South Carolina about 7 years ago, I was able to rebrand. I had to reincorporate. And so I was able to rebrand as Concord Leadership Group because I'd had a history of paying clients telling me, look, I'm the issue. Fundraising isn't the issue. Could you give me a site that makes it easy for me to pay you? And when you have one of the things as an entrepreneur, when you have a number of paying clients saying you're making it hard for me to hire you, you listen to that. So Concord Leadership Group was was that iteration of it. And the word Concord was because most people come split. There are two minds, and Concord speaks of bringing into one, for two things into harmony. So naming is also, for most of us that have businesses, we spend way too much time thinking about the name. Most people don't really
I agree.
choose us because of the name.
I agree with that. So I got a couple of things in my mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess when you rebranded into Concord Leadership Group, or let me say leadership coaching, did you see the drastic change on how people perceived you? Because one of my things I feel, because so much is betting for our attention today, people have tunnel vision, right? So for example, with Amma, people be like, well, I'm not a marketer, I'm a leadership coach. And I'm like, yeah, but you need marketing, especially if you...
Duh. Well, maybe they don't, but good for them if they don't. But yeah,
so it's kind of
all marketing.
And I struggle with that with, launching the group because everyone does need marketing. So whether you're a marketer or not, I at least want you to consider us when you need to learn marketing. So going back to you, do you feel like that just expanded, I guess, your ideal client or people interested in you because they knew you were leadership coaching?
And I wish I could say yes. It changed my life. It was wonderful. It was great. It actually was one of the most painful learning experiences I've ever had because I would go on to Zoom calls. Well, not Zoom in the day. It was telephone bridges or bridge lines. Or I'd go into conferences and people would say, oh, hi, I'm Michelle from Houston. And I would say, I'm Marc from fundraisingcoach.com. And I would say fundraisingcoach.com is where I was from. And you could see people be like, oh, that's interesting. I want to know more. When I remember sitting in my first event where I introduced myself as Marc at Concord Leadership, and I'm Marc from ConcordLeadershipGroup.com. Everybody's eyes went on to the next person. There was no hesitation. There was no stop. There was no curiosity sparked. And that should have been an indicator to me. The other thing I found out was that a lot of people thought I had left the nonprofit sector, which I didn't. The Concord Leadership Group is a group of brands. Fundraising Coach is one of those. Concord Leadership Group is one of those. And the Nonprofit Academy, which is a membership site I have for low cost, high quality training. But it was the marketing. I didn't do the marketing as well as I could have, I think. But I did start 5 or 6 years before Concord Leadership Group I hired a branding coach that helped me to point out that I didn't put leadership in any of my stuff on Fundraising Coach. So I was blogging every other week, but I was blogging about all leadership issues without specifically saying leadership. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those 101 sort of no duh thing. So I didn't even have to do anything goofy on my blog. I just had to go be explicit. I'm talking about leadership coaching. And so that did help me move the first 15 years of my business, fundraising coach. I noticed that I started with the board members and then I moved to the CEOs. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I wanted to stay. But then I started getting further down to the fundraising staff. So I went from the budget creators to the budget spenders. And I started hitting a lot of people saying, hey, we want you, but we can't afford you. As opposed to we want you and we're going to make it happen. And so that's why I hired that branding coach and it's just that simple thing of you're not telling people you're for leaders. They think you're about a tactic or a strategy as opposed to about leadership. So it wasn't, I don't know that, yeah, it's expanded some of my client base, and it's made my nonprofit clients feel like they have a home. They don't feel like they're getting, they don't, it's not hard for them to share with peers, or if they have a supervisory board or an HR committee or something, they can share it because Concord Leadership Group has got that sort of just, okay, that doesn't raise the question, but it's taken a long time. And in fact, it was my newest book that was created when the pandemic hit. My wife said, okay, we need to get this book out because I've been trying to write a leadership book for a long time. And my colleagues were also saying, Mark, if you go to Amazon and just search your name, it's all nonprofit books. So you may be a leadership guy, but you only write about fundraising as far as people can tell. So it's making sure my body of work reflected what I thought my calling in life was and what I want my business to be about.
But I like your growth because with your experience, you have a holistic approach to things, right? And I think, I know that, you know that, but one thing I've also had to learn is, sometimes we're too close, right? We can't Absolutely. Read the label from the inside of the bottle. Mm-hmm. Right. And then, we don't always market ourselves the best because it's second nature. And it's like, oh, I do this, this, and this. And it's like, but how? And it's like, I just do it, and we kind of expect other people to understand that, but there's that disconnect. So going back to marketing, constantly refining your message in order for people to be like, aha, now I can work with you. And this is how.
And it's also putting ourselves, that's really good. It's also kind of getting out of our own way because sometimes like with coaching skills are transferable to any sector. I firmly believe that. And some of the best coaches are not people that are experienced in the job that the person being coached is doing, but they're able to see outside. They're able to see different things because they don't know that particular job. But one of the things I found as a coach is that I would come to clients and say, I knew they were unique and different. Usually I've been in the sector long enough that people would say, oh, but that's, this is what's typical, but I'm different. So I wanted to start there. I wanted to start with I'm different. But they didn't hire that. They took me writing a book explaining a process that then they said, okay, he's got this. And now we can tell him why that's not going to work here. But there was something really satisfying in knowing that Pitman knows the process or knows a process, which I don't know if you found that too, but that to me is surprising. But I think about the people I hire too. I need proof that they are able to maybe help me to even talk with them. And they're just saying, no, I can help you isn't usually enough for me. So I don't know why I thought it would have been for clients.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I don't consider myself a coach, I consider myself more of a consultant because I like to recommend versus guide over a long period of time. But even then I have to have a framework, right? So I have a framework. And when I share that framework, I see the light bulbs go off, whether it's on a Zoom call or even in training with 10 people, especially with strategists, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, now I see how I can plug this in with the client and I'm like, and that's the sweet spot, right?
So great. I love that. Yes.
Okay. So thank you for sharing some of the challenges in your journey So with that being said, what makes leadership so damn hard?
Yeah. Well, I actually think that part of it is the structure we have in the West. I'm only familiar with Western colonial leadership structures, and they are isolating. The higher you go up in a position, the more isolated you get. Just as your decisions have more and more import and more impact on people, you have less and less supervision. And that becomes really scary because you realize all that you don't know, but you're not really allowed to share that. And because people need to trust you and want to know that they're going to have a job. And so there's a lot of, I think it's just, well, I've seen over the 20 years of coaching leaders, a lot of doubt that people are carrying around and afraid others are going to find out that they really don't have it all together. Kind of like the man in the Wizard of Oz, don't look at the guy, pay no attention to the person, the man behind the curtain. And so I think that's one of the things that makes it so hard is that there are so many of the ways that we're raised. There are guidebooks, there are curricula in school, there's assignments, there's how-to manuals for putting together things, but there isn't for life. We are all making this up as we go along, and it feels like that's not right. It feels like there should be a way that it's different. I called my dad we have 3 kids, sending the youngest off to college in this year. But I called my dad about 5 years ago and I said, Dad, you were just making it up as you went along, weren't you? It was so funny that he started laughing because I thought he had it together. I realized I'm at the age where I thought Dad knew exactly what was happening. He was smart, savvy. And we're all making it up as we go. But as leaders, we don't have safe spaces to tell that because it's not always safe. Sometimes people will weaponize that information and try to get our job. Other times it can create dissension within the ranks because people want to make sure they have their own responsibilities and they want to make sure they're going to get paid. So I think those are some of the reasons why leadership is so hard.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I have my close circle of girlfriends and, we're like, girl, my life is in shambles. And then next week we're like winning an award.
Right?
It's like, oh, we're doing great. So yeah, especially when entrepreneurship's involved. Okay. So let me back up.
Okay.
Because the old saying is it's lonely at the top. So do you feel like, I guess, some bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like, how can we create community as leaders, be it internal or external, to make us a better person, especially in the workplace?
Well, that's a great question. I think my first suggestion would be to find other leaders and other peers you can talk to. Here in Greenville, I've been hosting a monthly coffee Zoom call with CEOs just to create a safe space and hold a space for them to be able to just kind of let their hair down and just, hey, I don't know how to do this. The last one we talked about was, how do I fire somebody? There's somebody who's underperforming consistently in their reviews for years, and I don't know how to let them go. And there's just no place to people won't understand that unless they're at your level of whatever organizational level you're at. So it could be finding the people that you can trust enough to do that. So you can have that. Coaching I've seen that to be a really powerful mechanism because the coach is outside of the hiring and firing of any the system. And so you can just be there and not know. You can verbally process or get input from somebody else or being asked, does that sound crazy that I'm trying to think this way? And I think as you find those safe spaces, you start becoming safer as a leader. And you're able to build a community because hiding our struggles is exhausting. It takes so much energy. And often is about as effective as hiding behind a glass door. We close the door. We feel good that the door is closed, but everybody can still see our stuff. They can see right through the glass. Yeah. So I think that when we start finding that there's a safe space for us to share in our uncertainties, we are able to create that for the people that are on our team or that we lead.
I love that. I think when we do that, it leads to a greater sense of empathy and even interpersonal communication, because I think across the board, no one wants to fire anybody, right? No one
Right?
wants to have that conversation, but it's really about how do you manage that conversation? Like, how can you become delicate in this bad situation? You know?
Yeah. There's and how do you also do it in a way that doesn't expose you? So sometimes you can have a tough conversation with a friend, and that's one thing, but there are legal implications as well.
Right,
And so
right.
there's all these there's a lot wrapped up in that.
Okay.
The
So go ahead.
Well, another thing with leadership is it totally escaped me. I'll figure it out later. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Well, so we talked about the challenges and even a little bit of community and empathy. So what are some other things that can make us a more confident leader?
Oh, there it is. Thank you. You led right to it. So that doubt, where I call it the surprising gift of doubt, because there's that doubt that consumes most of us through our leadership journey, and sometimes just through our life journey, can be it can be that we're broken. It can be that we have deficits and we're not measuring up. But I firmly believe it can also be an invitation to look internally. So instead of saying, why do I keep not, that particular strategy doesn't work for me, and I didn't, that time management book, yet another time management book, I can't totally do all the system for. What it could be an invitation for, instead of saying I'm so broken, it could be, what if I'm exactly what this position needs? What if my team is exactly the voice this sector needs? How would that look? So instead of seeing your deficits, you start looking at your strengths and you start figuring out, why are we different? And is that a valid reason? There are, we look at your hardwiring interpersonally instead of with the team. You look at your hardwiring, what comes naturally to you, where are your blind spots, what doesn't come naturally to you. You look at the stories you're telling yourself, and are they serving you anymore? Or are they just creating a lot of toxicity in your brain and in your being? You can look at your goal setting. Many times leaders only set goals in silos. I have my work goals and I have my personal goals and I have my family goals or my community goals. But when we take them in whole and look at them all together, it can give us that kind of peace of mind of knowing, okay, when I'm at work, I can be at work because I know I'm taking care of my other relationships in other ways. And when I'm with those other relationships or doing those other things, I can be there because I know work is taken care of too. So there's also knowing our values is another thing that helps us in that. I call it Quadrant 3. So the first quadrant is where you're copying people, the people you've seen. And when that doesn't work, your confidence goes down. So you start trying to learn. Quadrant 2 is all about podcasts and conferences and certifications and degrees, trying to fix what's broken. And when the doubt is turned around into why am I so broken, to maybe I'm supposed to be this way, it pushes you to look into the internal influences as opposed to just the external, where you're able to look at things like your values. For me, one of the reasons I'm an entrepreneur is one of my core values I found out 20 years ago was independence. Mm. My wife noticed I had about an 18-month track record with employment. I will go in and it was the best thing ever. This job is awesome. This organization is great. And within 18 months, they're out to get me. I was to be like so paranoid. It was not a good, healthy thing. Realizing that independence is one of my core values helped me to make better choices. I know if I'm on a team, I need to tampen down that and watch out that could be divisive on a team. But I also know not everybody wants to be independent. Not everybody wants to be out there without a safety net. So there's a strength to that too.
Oh my God. Okay. I think I want to meet your wife.
Oh, so I'll share this with you. I haven't shared this with many people publicly, but this will be maybe a first and for a broadcast. I want to write a book called Entrepreneurial Whiplash: Advice for Spouses of Entrepreneurs. And I don't think I can write the book. I think I'll have to be Emily because she's amazing. She's taken a lot of risks with us. And it's when
you told that story, I was like, she must be a very patient woman.
Yes. 27 years proof. We just celebrated our 27th anniversary. So yes. Right.
Are you a leader who feels like they're struggling? Like someone changed the game you were playing? Somewhere along the course of your career, success shifts from having the right answers to asking the right questions. Through school and much of our career, we are expected to have solutions. So when we move into leadership, we just keep doing what's brought us success so far. But that no longer works. We now need to ask questions so others can come up with solutions. That's why leaders need the coaching skills taught in the Quadrant 3 Leadership Coach Certification Program. For more information, go to concordleadershipgroup.com/coach-certification to start growing your leadership skills today. One more time, that's concordleadershipgroup.com/coach-certification. Okay, so you did a very, very detailed video on dealing with difficult clients. So can you give us a tidbit, a few tips, maybe 3 tips from that video, or just in general, on how to deal with difficult clients?
Wow. Which one was it that you saw?
Nothing specific. I didn't get through all of it, so I can't say.
That's fair.
But I just, when I'm having conversations with friends and even myself, well, no, I'm in a better place. But past experience is, I think, one is pricing. 2 is with me focusing on DEI work, DEI marketing, particularly. This work is a lot. So I have to keep it transactional. And then one thing I had to learn was I can recommend, remind, and review. So I guess my question is, when clients don't want to push through on the recommendation, when they don't want to push through on the homework that you provide, but then they're happy because obviously they want new results, but they're not necessarily doing the work to see progress. Oh,
I so hear that.
Does that
There's so many different layers to that answer too. So one of the first things I decided early in my entrepreneurial journey was I am not responsible for somebody else's success. Like I can give the best, I can serve the buffet and give all the food on a plate. It's up to them to eat it. And that reduced my stress quite a bit because I was getting paid to provide a solution or provide content, and all the nagging I did later wasn't helping them. And that it became nagging, and it was negative energy. It was not a life-giving space for me, and it didn't seem to change anything about the clients actually doing the work. Ironically, what I found is the more I charged, the more they did the work. I don't know if there's a respect of their time and their resources that they actually wanted to invest in it. But that was kind of a happy accident that I discovered that my fee helped them take themselves more seriously. So I'm there for that. I'll help. I'd be glad to help that way.
Got some skin in the game.
Well, that is a huge part. I think one of the things too that I have found to be incredibly helpful, I've been using it for about 30 years, is a typology called the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there are so many different types of assessments, and many of them are behavior-based. You can see the behavior in somebody else, and so you can know kind of what classification they might be. Enneagram isn't that. It's motivation-based. It's based on the 9 types of stories people tell themselves to feel like they're successful in the world. And so what I love about it is the nuances that it opens up. So instead of just seeing a hard driving, goal accomplishing go-getter, and trying to respond to them that way, you can figure out what's the story they're telling themselves. Are they telling themselves that they have to look successful or else they're losing? Are they just wanting to find out new things, new shiny objects and never be still? Or are they trying to bring a sense of justice to the world that's an internal compass of justice, but trying to keep their team and themselves from being bullied and pushed around? So for those of you who know Enneagram, it's 3, 7s, and 8s I just described. Knowing that can also help your clients. There are some that are like 6 is so good at seeing all sorts of questions. around issues. And so that can be very frustrating as a consultant or a coach, because you're providing an answer, or you're providing something that to be true in your own experience, have you seen with other people. But the client doesn't know that in their own life. And a 6 will definitely be consistent about continually asking the questions over and over if they don't realize this, but it can often feel like an attack on our integrity. Because they just want something that's really trustworthy, or a person that can be really trusted in. So I have found kind of using those types of assessments, and all, at least on myself, helps me to get out of my own head and help kind of get out of the jar, I guess. So I can see that, there's a label on my jar, but there's labels on other people's jars too that are different. And that doesn't eliminate all problems, but it definitely helps.
It's a start. So I know with leadership, we tend to think of, top level, high up. And about 4 years ago, I had to learn, and it was my first time hearing this from my mentor, how to manage up.
Mm-hmm.
So for that employee that is not in a manager role, what advice can you give them when it comes to managing up?
Such a good question. I have, first of all, I believe that leadership is influencing others. So we all have an area of leadership, because usually we all have to influence others at some point each day. But for those that don't have positional authority, 2 things that are really, really key. One of them is working on yourself, getting to know what your strengths, weaknesses are, and getting to know what your values are, and not in a way to say, well, I can't do that because I'm this color, or I can't do that because I'm this letter or something. But knowing your tendencies and being able to know where you're going to thrive and what's holding you back. So having a sense of reflection, it builds a capacity within you that others start respecting. Mm-hmm. And they stop coming to you with the crises at some point, and they start asking, this is an urgency. It needs to be done tomorrow. Do you have time to do it? And I fully recognize that I'm saying that as a guy that has had centuries of privilege, systems that are built to support me as a straight white guy. But I've seen that in other people's too, where they start keeping commitments to themselves, and it starts and building in some margin to their work, even as an employee, that their peers and their superior, their leaders or whatever, managers, start respecting that too. It's kind of cool. So there's working on yourself. And the best part about that is you don't have to wait for anybody else to start working on yourself. So I love that. You're in control of that. But then there's also learning the dialect of your boss. Like, what is it that helps? What is it that they see as important, and learning to speak that. I was just talking with somebody yesterday from a job I had about over 20 years ago. It's not right when you start talking, we can start talking about our life in decades. It doesn't feel right. One of the things I would do is, it was a completely relational job. It was an alumni relations at a boarding school. No money coming in. I was used to I like sales. I like having checks come in. That's a way that I keep score, is I know, okay, revenue's coming in. Alumni relations wasn't that. It was all about the relationships and the people, which I like, but I didn't know how I was keeping score. So I created a simple Excel spreadsheet where I had a person's name, 4 different ways of communicating with them, and 4 different stages of the relationship that they might be in, and then some notes. So I was keeping myself honest I would default to email most of the time, but I wanted to do phone visits. There's different ways I wanted to communicate with them. And I was also keeping myself, making sure that I wasn't just sticking with one type of relationship always, like one stage of a relationship. I wanted to have a fluidity. Every week I would print out both sides of that sheet and write my boss's initials, FYI, my initials. Because I wanted her to know. The goal was to fill it up. There are 120 slots on that. Every call that came in, every call I put out, every contact I had, I logged. I was pretty open to collecting it. I didn't want to get too restrictive. But what I wanted was, I needed to know I've got something concrete to show for my work. And I wanted her to be able to see, wow, 120 people were touched, and I didn't have to do it. So that was a way of doing it. And I think there are probably an infinite number of ways that we can all learn what does our boss think is important, and then try to speak that dialect and then beta test. If it doesn't seem like it's working, maybe we're reading them wrong. So yeah, there are two ways. It was really good about employees being able to exercise some sort of leadership, and you do have to manage your bosses. You have to manage up, in part because part of it, in deference to leaders, which if they need it, is there's so much else that they're seeing. They're not just seeing what you're doing. I think that's one of the biggest surprises as we move up in positional authority, we start seeing a wider array of problems and opportunities. And so we do need to be reminded of what each section sees or what each employee sees. So I think it's really helpful if people can manage their bosses, not in a demeaning way, but I think managing up is something that's a really important skill.
Right. So my mentor told me that I think I was, 35, 36. But that simple thing, that those two words, if I just knew that in my 20s,
right,
I feel like it would have changed my career, right?
I learned that phrase in my master's in organizational leadership when I got my master's. Wow. And it was same with you. I felt like, wow, these are the ones that I need. This is the phrase that, managing up. I needed to know this because I had no idea.
I think I would have been more patient with myself in my career in finance. And it was just, I just felt like I couldn't move. I felt like it was too challenging. And when I left my last financial job, the biggest thing, I was like, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And my body, he's like, well, if you don't know, ask. And I was like, I don't know what I don't know. I feel like I'm doing the right thing in that moment.
Nice.
And I think
that's where peers can be helpful because they may spark something that you can say, but if it's safe, I don't know if you can do that in finance, but yeah.
Safe. I mean, I'm one of those people, I don't have a problem asking questions. I don't have a problem being naked and asking for help, but I can't ask you what I don't know. Like, I'm not even thinking about it, and the thing was, it's like at that time I had 2 years experience with that company versus his 20. And it's like, you've seen so many scenarios that you're able to pull from this hat. And I'm like, I
think it's brilliant that you were able to say, you didn't know what you didn't know, because I felt that too. I've had people that were in some sort of authority over me and they would ask me how you're doing. And I often felt like, I don't know. What do you see? And that's why I like going out on dates with my wife with another couple, because I get to hear how we're doing. But it's that benchmark. It's like an informal benchmark. It's like, okay, we're doing pretty good. Okay, this is all right. This is going well. Yeah, and I have a tendency to turn things positive. I always almost to a weakness. If there's not a silver lining on a cloud, I'll bring duct tape. Make some silver.
I think I'm the same way. And then to fast forward my experience when I was working at the law firm, and now I know what managing up was. So although I was a marketing manager, I reported directly to an attorney. So I knew, like, Mondays and Tuesdays, don't talk to him. It was Wednesday afternoon at 3:00 before he's out the door. And I'm like, hey, can I get 7 minutes at the end of the day? And not 10. Not 5, because 5 minutes people go over and he'll get upset, and I'll just have my bullet points. I'll have the paperwork. I need you to sign this, and just being quick, because I know time is precious, right? Time is a commodity for someone like him. So we had a good relationship for the most part, but it was those. Another thing about management and just overall experience, sometimes it's less of the hard skills and more of the soft skills, right? So it's like how you said it, the dialect of your manager. But it's like, how are you reading people to get an understanding of who they are and how they move in the work environment?
Well, and that's where most of us don't realize that we're so rewarded in school and in the sports field, or athletic field. Clearly, I don't play sports. I felt so seen in Schitt's Creek when they said sports ball. It's like, that's me. I get it. This is awesome. But we are rewarded for problem solving. We're rewarded for getting tasks done. But the higher up you move in management, that becomes a diminishing return, because as you start solving problems, you're being called a micromanager. You think you're helping your staff, but your staff is feeling demeaned and disrespected. So what we need to do is become coaches as leaders. We need to, first of all, learn people skills. When you start managing people in a mid-range, you just need to get along with others to get them to get stuff done. But then you also need to learn the coaching skills and the strategic thinking skills, and give yourself permission to take that space of, for me, one of the things I've been doing for a couple of years now is every 2 weeks, I take an hour and a half just to look over the next 2 weeks. What are my big projects? Am I putting the time into them? What's my intention or my focus for the next 2 weeks? That I'll give myself permission to be out of balance in. Who are the prospects? I write down all the prospects I'm following up with, because I find out if I write them down, even though I have a CRM, if I write them down, I'm more intentional about it. But that would often feel like not doing the work, because it's blocking off time on my calendar and doing that. But those are the things that as leaders, we need to increasingly do. And that is the work, but it's so counterintuitive, because that's not how we got promoted. If we get promoted, just checking things off lists and crossing them out and helping. I worked with one guy who was in the broadcast industry. He was a really good sound engineer, but he was a CEO now. And he had sound engineers working for him. So when he heard a problem with the broadcast, he would then try to come with a solution, which was really good previously in his career. But at this point in his career, it was really divisive. People, the labor union was actually activated around it, because it seemed like micromanaging and disrespecting the intelligence of the people they hired. And he just didn't know it. The other thing was, he was a 6-foot guy. And so he was literally talking down to people most of his day. So it was a very simple thing. One of the things I got him to practice. And that's why coaching is so fun, because you get to just time release things over each week and check in, or every 2 weeks, just check in. How did that work? Having all his meetings sitting down instead of leaning on the door jamb helped him get to the same eye level as the other person. And within 6 months, his employee satisfaction scores grew by double digits.
Little things.
Really? Yeah.
Little. Okay. All right. So you said this earlier, and I mean, I've enjoyed this whole conversation, but you said this earlier. I was like, this man knows my life. Okay. So you mentioned Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, podcasts, books, conferences, Quadrant 3, which is the name of your coaching.
Yes.
So I want you to dive into that, talk about your program, what you have coming up, and all of those good things.
Okay. So the Quadrant 3, since that's where the magic happens in coaching, that's why I call it Quadrant 3 leadership. And that's where we look at, if you do a Venn diagram, the 3 big areas are hardwiring, storytelling or identity, and goal setting, and the overlaps personal style, mission, and values. And I call that, people have called that, when they saw it, they said that's the integrity model, because you're working in integration. So I've approved that use of that model. I like being called the integrity model. But with the coach certification program, back when I became a coach 20 years ago, there were the only coaches that seemed to be really having a clear business model that was creating revenue for them were coaches coaching coaches how to be coaches. It seemed like a Ponzi scheme. It seemed like it's so circular and so much of a scam. So many of us as entrepreneurs don't do what we would tell our clients to do. So I did my business plan a year after I started my business. And so a year after I started my business, I was writing, I want to have a coach certification program, but I had benchmarks. I wanted to have a business worth teaching others. I wanted to have others ask me about that. And then I also wanted to have other coaches ask me. So not just other leaders, but other coaches. And in 2012, I had 110 coaches invite me in to speak on how I coached people. And they were all doing the same sort of coaching, which is, all of a sudden I realized now all of my excuses are gone. I have no more excuses. I get it. I need to do this certification. So what we do is we take 2 different types of groups. We take people that want to learn coaching skills in their job, and we take consultants. Primarily so far, it's been consultants that want to add a coaching revenue to their services. They can see projects, but they want to have that connectivity with clients between projects. And what we've also seen is one of the most fun recently has been consultants who want to get better at working with and leading with their staff, and then realizing, oh, wow, I'm not offering coaching either. So they're getting both. They're coming in to learn to grow themselves, but then they're also being able to add coaching services themselves. So we do a 10-week program. It's usually 10 weeks. It's 10 modules. We've experimented with the 5-module one as well. And there's homework in between, a couple of books to read, but we try to make the homework fit into people's lives. So it's not just adding stuff onto a already busy schedule. And I was so blessed when one of my dreams, like a big, hairy, audacious goals, was to have the International Coach Federation accredit this certification. So it wasn't just a Marc Pitman accredited or Concord Leadership Group accredited. I had a friend ask me that, who's your certifying coaches? Who's the certification from? I said, Concord Leadership Group. And he didn't seem so impressed because he knew me. So ICF was going to take 2 months. They approved it in 2 weeks, even before it was offered. And they said, look, we will approve it for 15 hours, but it's really worth 36. So more than twice what I applied for. Could you refill the application out correctly? I was like, okay, I will do that. So it's been ICF accredited 36 hours. So coaches needing their continuing education credits can take it too and get those.
Very cool. Very cool. And when does the next module start?
We're starting September 7th for the next one. Applications, depending on when this is released, should still be open at concordleadershipgroup.com/coaching-certification. But we tend to run them September and January, and then we do some other time. We play with a different type of timing too. It's usually Wednesdays, midday. So people use their lunch hour or something for the class. And
what if someone is maybe new to coaching? How will they know this is the right fit for them?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't accept them if they weren't. So they have to go through an application process and a conversation with me. And what I have found, what I put in the write-up when I was working with my coach to do the curriculum design for this, is it is for people that have at least 3 to 5 years of experience, management experience under their belt, and people that have experienced significant failure, something that was really painful. I have found people that have really been hurt by failure tend to be more open to learning. And so it's less hypothetical to them. It's very real. And so I put that as, I don't require that, and I don't ask them what the failure is, but I just say, this is better suited for you if you've tried stuff and it failed and you've had 3 to 5 years of experience. In management or in working with people, not in coaching.
Yeah.
This can be, nobody has to have coaching experience to take the certification.
I am very impressed with what you said. Like, they have to have a failure, because I have talked to a lot of coaches, all types, and I think that point right there sets you apart. I think it's an honest question, and whoever can answer that is an honest person, right? And it's a level of vulnerability without going into details, because you're not asking the details, but it's like, yes, I'm ready to change.
We had, one of my iterations of who I am was I pastored a church for 4 years. I was a church planter, it was called. We went to a community we didn't know. We started a church. And in 4 years, we decided to close it. We took two weeks to have a funeral for the church, including doing a Sawzall through the church sign. We wanted the congregation to really know that we're honoring a bookend to this experience. But then there was no place for us to go. Our denomination was about church planting, not about supporting church planters that failed. And a large percentage of them that went out the way we did fail. And if you're in a community you don't know, the church, the spiritual community that you want to be part of is typically the one you were trying to build, not the ones that exist already in the community. So we started, there were 2 other couples that had that experience too, in the same kind of time frame. So we started a Church for Losers gathering. We'd go every couple of months. We'd get bourbon and smoke pipes and cigars. And when we'd say, "Yeah, I'm over this now," we'd all go, yeah. We'd raise our glass because my wife was like, "Oh, we can have a CFL ball because we're still the light of the world, but we're Church for Losers," because of the curly Q thing. So that was, to me, there was something very validating in acknowledging that experience was a failed experience. I'm not a failure. I'm not defined by that. Mm-hmm. But we didn't know, people didn't know how to work with us in the rest of the denomination either, because we'd go to the other church that we'd been sent from, and people would feel weird talking to us. Like, shouldn't you be in your community? So having some peers that we could get together with and just really augment and kind of anchor that. And then in my faith tradition, the Christian faith tradition, the Hebrew scriptures are full of people that are on, it's plan B or plan C that we know them for. It's not plan A. But we don't think of that. But many of the people that we like to follow, it's their second act or their third act that is where they've actually are known for. It's not the failures that lead up to it. So, I definitely, it's a passionate part for me. So I'm really glad you picked up on that. Thank you. I didn't realize it was unique necessarily, but I'll definitely own that space for sure. That's awesome.
I'm going to stop there because y'all don't need to know my personal business.
Respect that.
Marc, it is an absolute pleasure talking to you today. How can people find you?
Well, thank you for having me. You are a delight. And I love what you're doing with the African American Marketing Association, because we need as many voices that can market themselves well in the way that people can understand as possible. So thanks for that. I try to be ridiculously easy to find. So if you Google Marc Pitman, you should get me. You might get a movie actor that's been in some B-grade movies like Attack of the Killer Tomato type ones, but that's not me. I'm usually the guy with the bow tie. I'm Concord Leadership Group.com is usually the best place to find me. I love Twitter too. So I'm Marc A. Pitman on Twitter, MarcAP as in Peter, ITMAN. Marc, it looks like Marc Pitman. And if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I love connecting there too.
Yeah, and we'll have all of those links, the right links, in the show notes. And of course, please check out the Quadrant 3 Leadership coaching program that starts on September 7th. We're going to have those details. And if you love this conversation, you need to go ahead and apply. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and apply. It's a process, Marc, once again, thank you for your time today. Thank you for all of the knowledge, but you made it fun.
Thank you. Well, and I want to just, since you did such a nice pitch on the certification, I am offering scholarships too. So partial scholarships to help. I really want a wide variety of people to be in this program. So if money is the only reason anybody that's listening doesn't do the certification, let's have a conversation, because I want to make this accessible to people too. But thank you. You're a blast. You're a great interviewer, and this has been a real joy, a delight.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you back. I got some homework to do. I need to read one or two of your books, and then bring you back in a couple of months.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Concord Leadership Group, and their 10-week leadership program, with the next course beginning in September. Remember to apply today at concordleadershipgroup.com/coach-certification. That is concordleadershipgroup.com/coach-certification. Thank you for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, our videos are on YouTube. If you have a moment, feel free to give us a rate, review, or just comment. We appreciate our sponsors for their continuous support. Also, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors or becoming a member of the African American Marketing Association, visit aa-ma.org.